There's something in the wall. You aren't going to believe me. I know you aren't. No one believes me. I was almost admitted once, sectioned under the 136 Act, taken away and medicated. I think now that it might have been better if I had been. I managed to explain it all away, told them I was fine, and my neighbor shouldn't have called a wellness check. But I wasn't fine. I will never be fine, not now, not now it's taken control of everything. I haven't been fine, anywhere close to fine, since I heard it. It's been over a year. It will be longer. When I first heard it, I thought I was imagining things, or that maybe my tinnitus was playing up, so I just ignored it. I don't think it liked being ignored. Sometimes I wonder if things would be better if I had listened the first time. Whether it wouldn't have destroyed me the way it has, and the way it will continue to do. I would say that I will hear it until I die, but by now I'm sure that no one will notice my death. I'll just lie on the floor of my flat, and maybe once my flesh and cartilage has rotted and my ears are no longer there, maybe then I'll finally be rid of it. The second time I heard it, I thought a bird was stuck in the heating grate. The flats used to be an old house, and I'd heard about birds falling down the chimneys and getting stuck. So I unscrewed the grate, and shone my phone torch into the dusty cavity, listening with interest to the noise. I couldn't see anything in there, nothing to suggest a misplaced crow or confused pigeon, so I shut the grate again, but the noise was insistent. It was like a scratching, something clawing against the plaster. I couldn't decide, then, if I thought it wanted to come out or not. I know now. I don't think it can come out. I don't think it could survive. Or maybe it could, and this is just how it has fun, pushing me to the edge until I'm a shivering wreck on my living room floor. Either way. The scratching went on for hours, endless, ceaseless scratching. I couldn't place where it was coming from, just that it didn't seem to tire. Eventually I watched TV with volume on high, trying to drown it out. It worked, and after a while the scratching stopped entirely, but like I said, I don't think it liked me ignoring it. The third time I heard it, I was scared. It had been a week or so since the last time, and I contented myself with the idea that a mouse had gotten into the wall and had scrabbled around before dying, which, while disgusting, had pacified me. But when it started again, it was impossible to ignore. It moved through my flat faster than a mouse could. And it was higher too, around my chest height if I had to guess. I was terrified. The scratching wasn't consistent anymore either, it changed depending on what it was doing. I could hear it when it moved, like nails dragging slowly across the other side of the wall. I could track its progress. It was then that I decided it was a hand. I never heard any footsteps, but the scratching was loud and clear through the plaster that I could almost see its position. I called the police. When they came, I told them to listen, expecting them to look in horror at the corner, as I did when I heard it, but they just asked me what they were meant to be listening to. When I told them, gesturing to where the noise was coming from, they looked at each other skeptically and asked if I had used an illicit substances. I shooed them from my flat. The scratching lasted for 2 days, and when it ended I was exhausted. I had barely slept, kept awake by the terror, hearing it pass by my bed, scratching above me. My work suffered. My relationships suffered. In those 2 days I was so distracted I could barely hear a word my friends were saying. When I told them why, they just laughed. I felt like I was going insane. I even went and had my ears tested. I bought a carbon monoxide detector, and when they brought back nothing I started recording it. I had hoped when I first tried it, that the recording would be quiet. At least then I'd have had an answer. Auditory hallucinations, even then, seemed easier to deal with than the constant fear and confusion. After the third recording, I stopped. It was somehow worse to hear played back. Maybe because it was playing over the top of the real thing, 2 shovels burying me instead of 1. After that, I rarely had a moment's reprieve. The scratching filled my flat, all day and night. I could hear the thing moving around, sometimes fast, almost running, sometimes slow and languorous. The only thing I have to go on is the scratching, no footsteps, no breathing. Once I considered the possibility of rats or insects, but it didn't make sense. The scratching was too coordinated, too deliberate. It went on for months. Exhausted as I was, I couldn't work, couldn't focus. I didn't have a difficult job, just numbers and spreadsheets, but I was miserable and constantly on edge. I couldn't meet with people, and slowly but surely my friends dropped away, leaving me alone. I spent all my time in my flat, stalked by that infernal noise. After a month, I had been fired. I had no job, no friends. I was trapped, all day every day, trapped almost inescapably with that thing. That noise. I wanted to leave, but where would I have gone? By now it was getting colder outside, and I had no money, no friends. I was fraught with fear and fatigue, so getting another job was out of the question. I didn't understand what was happening, or why. I thought it couldn't get worse. I thought my life would only be this, eternal, inexorable scratching. But it could. It could get worse. And it would. My light was on. I distinctly remember that the light was on, and that I had not turned it off. I had no intention of turning it off. As I was sitting there, on my floor, the lamp shining on the table, I heard the scratching. I hadn't heard it move down the wall before. It had always been at the same level, and so when I heard it descending down the wall towards the skirting board, my head snapped round to look so fast I almost gave myself whiplash. The scratching moved along the base of the wall, to the socket, and then started scratching its way along the wire. I was past fear by this point, driven almost to madness by it, and so I just listened wildly, hearing it get closer to the lamp, and the bulb went out. It was like it couldn't keep its fingers still, scrabbling and scratching even as it moved back up the wire. But it had turned the light off. That's where I am now. My flat is almost always dark, my curtains scratched shut during the day, and lights scratched off at night. But I don't need light to know where it is. It scratches the pictures back and forth on the wall, it scratches my books off of shelves. I'm trapped in my own flat. It scratches the door locked, it scratched out my phone lines. It's like it stalks me, in the dark and the cold, round and round in the walls, in the wires. It never sounds like two hands, just one, scratching around without rest or pause. I have no one and nothing but the scratching. I rarely sleep, I barely eat, not that I have much food left. I used to wonder about my rent, but now those things seem useless, tiny little thoughts compared to the scratching. I swear it gets louder every day, but it doesn't get any harder, there isn't any more pressure behind it. It's just loud, piercing, like the pattern is being scratched into my scalp. I don't understand how I'm even being allowed to type, but you need to believe me. I know you won't, no one does, no one ever will. But I promise there's something in the wall,